This morning, the United States and China appear to be inching closer to a trade war after Beijing revealed it would be retaliating against Washington tariffs with their own on U.S. goods. This was within minutes of the U.S.'s 10% tariff on Chinese imports coming into effect at midnight.
Beijing announced that it would impose tariffs of 15% on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, also 10% on other U.S. imports like crude oil and agricultural machinery. Beijing says those tariffs would go into effect on February 10th. That's next Monday. Despite this looming trade war with China, America's tariffs on Canada and Mexico appear to be on hold for now. Following a phone call with Canada's Prime Minister, Mr. Trump said he would pause tariffs for 30 days, citing Canada's plans to ramp up border security. It's important to note those border plans by Canada had actually been announced back in December. Yesterday morning, the president put a similar tariff delay on Mexico after speaking with his Mexican counterpart. She also told him that her country would be beefing up security at the southern border.
They've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. And we're going to have a big negotiation with Mexico. I'll be involved too, and President Sheinbaum will be involved to see whether or not we can work something out on the tariffs.
A lot to cover. Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Gilchrist and NBC News international correspondent Janis Mackey Frayer, who is in Beijing. Good morning to both of you. So, Janis, let's start with you. Walk us through these retaliatory tariffs China has announced. Which U.S. industries is China targeting?
Well, as President Trump stands down on Canada and Mexico, it seems to be heating up with China. Rapid-fire retaliation today from Beijing on multiple fronts. First, China is imposing additional tariffs of 10 to 15% on a range of U.S. imports, including coal, liquefied natural gas, crude oil, and farm machinery. It's also targeting some car imports, namely pickup trucks, and announced additional export controls on more than 24 critical metals. This is effective immediately. The tariffs, though, take effect on February 10th. The measures aren't seen as making a huge dent in the U.S. economy. Economists say it's more symbolic. The measures affect roughly 30% of U.S. exports to China. But they do seem designed to send a message from China that it could get a lot worse, in particular for red states. It's thought that China's leader, Xi Jinping, and President Trump were looking for a reset in relations. Xi sent his vice president to attend the inauguration. And that potential is still seen as being there. But on tariffs, Xi and the officials around him would not want to be seen as caving to President Trump, the U.S., or the West. So China was expected to hit back. Joe and Savannah.
Yeah, so Aaron, let's bring you in here and pick up right there. We understand President Trump is expected to speak with China's President Xi over the next few days. Were these retaliatory measures expected by the White House? And does it mean that we then see the Trump administration hit back again?
I think yes and yes. We knew over the weekend that the Chinese indicated that they would take steps to push back when these, if and when these tariffs from the U.S. went into effect, that they would challenge the tariffs in the World Trade Organization in sort of a court setting, and that they would take these steps that we now know they have taken. At the same time, we heard from President Trump yesterday that he intends to talk to the Chinese president, and so that could be a sign that there might be a deal to be made here, as we saw with Mexico and with Canada. At the same time, we know that the original executive order that was signed that put these tariffs on China did include a retaliation clause. And so it said that if China took action, then the U.S. could take additional actions. The sound you played from President Trump indicated as much as well. And we also heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio say on television last night that he felt like if China continued to cheat and steal, the words he used, then that there would be additional actions taken by the U.S. I think it's worth pointing out that that sort of murkies the water here, because that seems to indicate something economic. At the same time, we know that these tariffs from the U.S. were originally put in place, at least according to the executive order, because the U.S. administration wanted to stop the flow of fentanyl and precursor drugs that come from China.
So, Janis, you've got the tariffs, but on top of that, China also announced it's going to open an investigation into Google, while adding certain U.S. companies to what it calls its unreliable entity list. So what is that? What does this all mean?
Well, it's an antitrust probe into Google, which is not the first. for the company. It doesn't do a lot of business here because the search engine is obviously blocked, but it is disruptive for Chinese companies, and the government appears to be wanting to make a point. As well, two companies, PVH Group, which owns clothing brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and Illumina, it's a gene sequencing startup. They're both being added to China's unreliable entity list here, meaning they're effectively blacklisted from doing business. So this reaction, again, coming from China on multiple fronts. The uncertainty now is whether this is all the preamble for negotiating tactics between these two huge economies, or whether it's the beginning of a deeper trade confrontation. President Trump has said that he plans to speak with President Xi. It isn't clear when or if that call is happening. But with both sides now looking for leverage in this, the signs seem to point to a bumpy road ahead. Joe and Savannah.
Aaron, we mentioned tariffs are on hold for Canada and Mexico. What happens next there?
Yeah, 1 month delay on the tariffs for Canada and Mexico after each of those countries indicated they would push back if the tariffs were applied to them. At the same time, these leader phone calls happened just yesterday where President Trump spoke with the Mexican president and the Canadian prime minister and decided that some concessions would be made, that the Mexicans would send 10,000 troops to their northern border to deal with the flow of undocumented migrants and the flow of drugs as well. The Mexicans said the U.S. Had agreed to start working on trying to prevent high-powered weapons from crossing into Mexico. The Canadians, for their part, saying that they would spend upwards of $1 billion on border security via additional helicopters and personnel, as well as some technology being used there. They would create a position of a fentanyl czar in the Canadian government. Those are all things that seem to be enough to create this pause. Although the White House is saying that they'll be evaluating this along the way. They'll have Secretary of State Rubio, as well as several other secretaries, continuing negotiations with both Canada and Mexico. Savannah, Joe?
We'll see if we're right back here a month from now. Aaron, Janis, thank you both.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.